We're continuing on with the Locrian mode, measuring around this B note, remembering that a lot of people just skip the Locrian mode when they're thinking about these types of intervals. But I think it's really useful to look at it because although you're not possibly going to be playing in Locrian mode, although you can try to do it, it's kind of fun to play around with, you still need it for chord construction because that's going to give you that tension note that leads back oftentimes to like the 1 if you're in a major scale. So you still need it because you don't want to just lose that note as something that you could build a chord from. So let's do a quick recap on how all these things are related. And also just remember that as we look through all these kind of modes, we want to see that they're all related, right? They're all tied together. They're all part of the same kind of thing. And therefore, again, Locrian mode is just one of the modes it's useful to look at. It's going to be building the same shape. So if I go up top, how do we do this? We're starting with the major scale because that's just the convention in Western music, but we're typically going to be building it around this shape, which is possibly the most popular shape in this area of the guitar, which a lot of people call position number 1 from a pentatonic 5-note position. Would look like that. Adding the 2 other notes to make it 7 notes. It looks like that. If you play it from this A, you're basically playing a minor scale, however, and we can just basically start from any other note and play from that note to that note, making any other note the tonic, and that would make any of the other notes basically the related modes that we would be playing in. And it's useful to be thinking about, theory-wise, the major scale as our point of reference, our key of reference, and that's just a convention, which possibly most likely came from, playing on the piano, which seems to be kind of orientated towards, the C major kind of idea. So it's just useful to use that as our convention. So we're basically going to think about how we can build the shape 3 different ways. We can actually just learn the shape, which oftentimes people break the guitar up into 5 shapes and then they learn each shape, which is great. Or we can break it up into 3-note per string shape or 2-note per string shape. All that is great. Love it because that works kind of like an Excel worksheet, and that's beautiful. Excel worksheets are great. So if you can make the guitar look like an Excel worksheet, man, that's like Christmas. That would be great. That would be wonderful. But you can also learn it with the formula, like whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half, and that kind of thing, which I haven't spent as much time on, but I'm working on something. I'm mulling this over to get a better appreciation of that method on how we can map it out on the guitar, which isn't exactly linear, to get a better idea of that. Because if you think about it from that perspective, I've been thinking that it really emphasizes just 2 types of intervals, a whole step and a half step, a minor second and a major second, if you want to think about it that way. So that means that if you know where you are in the scale, then you can just think about those 2 intervals really. And so I'm mulling that out. I think I'm going to make a project on that. So look forward to that. It'll be great. But the intervals are going to be quite useful because we can measure from any point and think about the intervals from that point, which basically means we're going to construct the same shape from a different central point. That's very useful because those intervals are also things that we can use to define our chords. So we need those interval constructions. So how do we get that? Usually we look at the intervals for the major scale, and then we compare possibly the main minor to the major scale, which is the Aeolian. I'm going to go through this more quickly because I know we saw this in the prior 2 presentations as well. This is just a recap. So the Aeolian is the minor scale, so I can compare that to the major scale, where you would think all of the majors would be flipped to minors, and the perfect would be the same, which is the case except for the minor, except for the second, where the main minor, Aeolian, the minor scale, still has a 2-note away major second. It doesn't have a minor second. Now, there is one that does have a minor second, and that's the Phrygian. So the Phrygian is actually more minor than the main minor, the minor scale, otherwise known as the Aeolian. And then the Locrian is the one that we're focused on, actually more minor than the main minor, plus it's got the crazy flat 5th. So that's how I would basically kind of put the Locrian into play. So what do we want to do? We want to be able to see all the notes that are in a scale. We would like to be able to build a chord from every note in the scale, not just in the major scale, but from the perspective of any other mode. Dorian, Phrygian, Lydian, Mixolydian, and so on. How could we do that? Well, if I know all the notes in the scale, I know that I usually can just add a fifth at least, which is called a power chord, to all of the notes except the funny one, which is the one we're kind of focused on now, the seventh of the major scale, which is the you can call it the Locrian note, right? In the scale, in which case it has a flat fifth. So that's useful. Then I want to be able to add the third, which means I've got to somehow memorize that for example, major relative positions 1, 4, 5 have major chord constructions, 2, 3, 6 have minor chord constructions, and then the 7 again is that oddball out. That's the one we're focused in on here, which still has kind of like a minor chord construction from the perspective of the third because it has a minor third. Now, I would like to be able to go beyond doing it just on the major scale and also be able to look at all the notes from the position of a Dorian and know which of all of these notes should be constructing a major third and a minor third, major chord, minor chord. How could I do that? Well, if I start to memorize the relative modal positions to the major scale, that's one way we can do it, which is why I'm going to number the modes based on the major scale. And that could at least allow me to kind of figure out what the relative position is on the major scale, which will help me because I know that the 1, 4, 5 of the major scale has a major third, the 2, 3, and 6 has the minor third. So that's one thing we can do there. And then I would also like to know not just the 1, 3, 5, but the 7, 9, 11, and 13, the 9, 11, 13 being equivalent to the 2, 4, and 6, the even notes that are skipped. How could we know that? To know that, you're going to need to know, in essence, the modes, the intervals for each of the modes to know whether or not you're adding a 7, 9, 11, and 13 that's still in the same key. So that means how can I learn the intervals? Well, if I can compare the 4 and the 5 modes, the chords that can be constructed off of the 4 and the 5, in this case the F and the G, to the Ionian modes, and there's only going to be one interval difference. So, and then I can compare the minor modes, the Dorian and the Phrygian, to the Aeolian, and there's only going to be one interval difference. And then we're left again with this Locrian that we just keep ignoring, which is kind of like a minor mode, right? I would think of it as a minor mode, and this is going to be important because it gives you that tensiony note. So then it's like, okay, but what happens when I hit this, in this case, the B? What happens when I hit that? I can't do anything with it because I've completely ignored it in terms of how I'm going to build a chord. I can't even put a fifth on it, right? Because it doesn't even work for a power chord. So we have to know that because we want to do something with it, right? We want to build a chord on it if we're making a song progression. We don't want to just drop the note generally, or you could, but so that means, my story would be, how am I going to remember the intervals for the Locrian? My story would be, well, it's kind of like a minor mode. So like the Aeolian is the main minor. So that's like obviously the Ionian is the cool kid, right? Because they're like the major scale, and that's like all of Western music. So they're like the most famous one everybody plays in the major scale. And then you've got the hanger-ons to the major scale, which are the Lydian and the Mixolydian. But the Mixolydian kind of does its own thing because it's kind of like more of the minor thing because it has the flat 7, so it's kind of doing its own thing. But then you've got the minor modes, which are darker, man. They're like, whatever, I'm like gonna be like more darkish, and that the main minor is the Aeolian, which is the minor scale, which is the 6th. But then like Phrygian, and then the Dorian is like, that's too dark, and the Dorian's like, I'm gonna add an interval that still has another major interval to lighten it up a little bit. So it's kind of like trying to be cool between the majors and the minors and still have like some major elements, but still be cool with like both groups, but then the Phrygian is like, dude, I'm going way minor, and it's because even the Aeolian isn't minor enough. So the Phrygian actually took that that 2 note away major second and made it into a 1 note away minor second. So it's even more minor than the main minor. And then the Locrian is like the Phrygian, more minor than the main minor, but it also has a flat fifth. It went crazy with a flat fifth. Nobody does that. Nobody does that. But they did it, except the Lydian kind of does it, but it has an augmented fourth, which is the same interval, but we're talking flat fifth here, and nobody does that because everybody has a power chord. Like, you don't even have a power chord, dude. You don't even have a power chord. And so that's going to be the story. So if I look at the major scales, we have a perfect first, a 2 note away major second, a 4 note away major third, a 5 note away perfect fourth, the 7 note away perfect fifth, the 9 note away major sixth, the 11 note away major seven. So what would we expect from a Locrian mode, which is basically more minor than the main minor, the Aeolian minor scale, and has a crazy flat fifth? Well, we would assume all the perfects would be the same except for the crazy flat fifth. That's the really standout change. And we would expect all the majors to be converted to minors, even the second. And that's what we have. So if I scroll down to the Locrian, we're going to say, what are the intervals? It has a perfect first. Of course, they all do. We have a 1 note away minor second. That's the one that's different than the main minor, which still has a major second. And the Locrian, like the Phrygian, is like, no, I'm going total minor here, total minor. And then it's got a 3 note away minor third, which to me would mean it's a minor mode because it has a minor third, and the third is typically the thing that defines whether it's minor or not. It's got a 5 note away perfect fourth. That's the one that's normal, that all of the modes have a perfect fourth, except for the Lydian that has the augmented fourth, which is actually the same distance as the 6 note away diminished fifth. So this is the weird one. It flattened the fifth. Nobody flattens the fifth. That's what makes the Locrian loco. And then it has an 8 note away minor six, which is normal for a minor mode, except for the Dorian. That's the one that the Dorian tries to be cool with, the like in between the two groups by having a major six. And then it has a 10 note away minor seven, which is normal for a minor mode.